Welcome to the Navigating Cancer Together podcast. My name is Talea Dindy. I am a 10-year cancer thriver, cancer doula, and owner of On the Other Side. I use my experience to help others get on the other side of cancer. This podcast is about sharing stories, resources, and information about all things related to cancer and wellness. I interview guests from all walks of life who are living with cancer, caregivers, and those who made it on the other side. Also, I talk with organizations, healthcare professionals, and experts in the health and wellness spaces who offer complementary and integrative care. Join me. We are in this together. Hello, and welcome to Navigating Cancer Together. My name is Talea Dindy, and today our very special guest is Maren Mittal. Welcome, Maren. It's so nice to have you with us today. Maren Mittal is a therapist and success coach and is most passionate about partnering with individuals to build a strong, authentic relationship with themselves, which is the foundation of building strong, authentic relationships with others. She is certified in Brainspotting, which is a progressive brain-body healing protocol, and the Daring Way psychoeducation material based on the research of Dr. Brené Brown, who approaches two approaches that can integrate with inner healing spiritual practices. Maren owns her private practice, Revealing Life Holistic Services in Minnesota. In her free time, she enjoys being a mom of 2 young adults, golfing and traveling with her husband, being outdoors, and exploring new healthy recipes. Maren, thank you so much for joining us and welcome.
Thank you, Talea. I am so excited to be here today.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a pleasure having you. So Maren, let's just jump right in. Tell us a little bit about who you are and the work that you do.
Yeah, that sounds good. Like you mentioned in my bio, I'm a therapist and a success coach, and I own my own business, and I'm really passionate about relationships. So the clients I work with are individuals who oftentimes are bumping up into barriers of, I want something in my life, I want some momentum, but they feel stuck somehow. So I love partnering with people, helping them navigate that journey and give them new tools to get unstuck and move forward in their life.
That's wonderful. I would like for you to explain to the audience what Brainspotting is. Thankfully, I had the opportunity to do a session with you and it was amazing. And I really want the audience to understand how Brainspotting can help them, navigate cancer, kind of help them work through the trauma and all the different things that come along with cancer. So let's start with, what is Brainspotting?
Yeah, that sounds good. Brainspotting is a pretty new idea in the world of psychotherapy. It was actually developed by Dr. David Grand, who was doing EMDR. That's a lot more well known, but he discovered and evolved Brainspotting, which is an approach that that's with somebody's brain, but also their body, in order to heal or integrate problem areas, trauma, beliefs, fears. It can actually work with a lot of different topics and areas, which I know we'll talk about today. It's an approach that's relational, but also works with the brain and the body.
Thank you for explaining that to the audience. And it sounds like when I hear that, I immediately think of mind-body connection. And so how did you learn about Brainspotting?
Yeah, I have a friend who I've known for 20 years, and she was trained in Brainspotting, and she was like, Maren, you have to do this. And I was like, oh, it's kind of a lot of money. It's a big time investment. And she said, well, no matter what, you get to go and practice on each other. So you get to be Brainspotted like 6 times in one weekend. So it'll be worth your money. So I decided to jump in, go ahead and do it. And It's actually been really life-changing for me, and I've seen life-changing aspects for my clients as well.
That's great. And, sometimes we hear about these new techniques and things like that, and we're not always sure if we should learn more about them and dive into them. And so it sounds like you've experienced a lot of benefits from brain spotting. What are some of those benefits that you personally experienced?
Yeah, that's a great question, because that's the most powerful thing, right? When we experience it ourselves, then we can give it away to others.
Mhm.
Last summer, actually, I had major abdominal surgery. They found that I did have a 6-inch tumor on my kidney, and I was very thankful that it was benign, but I still had a lot of medical intervention that I had to go through. And I realized when I came home from surgery, I was having all of these thoughts on being violated or invasion. And of course, during surgery, you're not awake, you don't know what happens, but I kept having thoughts of, were they taking care of my body or were they being rough? Like, I know they inserted a catheter in the middle of my surgery, which I wasn't awake for. It's like, okay, that feels like a personal boundary violation. And these thoughts were just so pervasive after my surgery. Well, I was able to connect with my friend, and she was able to do some brain spotting with me. And once again, this was not something I experienced consciously, but brain spotting was able to help me connect to the parts of my brain that did know what was going on, even at a subcortical level, and my body that experienced the trauma of surgery, and be able to let those pervasive thoughts go, settle more into comfort instead of fear and anxiety, which, fear and anxiety, right, deters us from healing. So when we have that medical trauma in our bodies, we want to get to a place to be able to heal holistically, and brain spotting allowed me to do that.
That's right. That's the key, to heal holistically. And that is something that is so important. It was important for me. And it's something that I think is important for the clients that I work with, is to, hey, we know that we need to make sure you're healed physically, but there's so many other aspects of that: emotional, spiritual, all of those different things that play a whole part in the bigger picture. So thank you for
Absolutely.
explaining your experience.
Yeah, yes, absolutely.
And Maren, a lot of different things come up when someone is diagnosed with cancer. There's guilt, anxiety, as you mentioned. There's a lot of anger at times. How can a brain spotting session help someone work through those different emotions?
Yeah, that's a great question. And brain spotting approaches the relationship with the client and the therapist in a very safe way. So the therapist is there creating a safe space for the client and their brain to be able to work through, whether it's a trauma or an emotion or a belief, in a way that the brain knows how to do it. So we're talking about holistic healing, and brain spotting opens up this space for creativity and flow that partners with our brains in the way that they know how to heal. So we would start with whatever issue is coming in. So like the client's like, hey, I'm really struggling with fear of recurrence. I had a client who actually experienced that. Her mother passed away from the same type of cancer that she was later diagnosed with, and her fear of recurrence was disrupting her life. So I was able to work with her in her body. Where did she feel that in her body? But also work with her brain to be able to say, okay, what does the brain need to do to be able to work through the fear, to be able to work through the anticipation? And through a couple different sessions, it was amazing that the pain in her abdomen completely went away.
That's wonderful. And as I mentioned earlier, I actually had the opportunity to have a session with you. And one thing that really stood out to me was the amount of energy that you put into creating a comforting atmosphere, which really allowed me to just kind of let go and feel safe and allow the experience to happen just naturally. So I didn't feel like I had to, hold on tight to anything. And my experience with you in that session was that, there was an area where I was just having a lot of tightness and a lot of pain and things like that. And I know that it was a part of stress. And by the end of our session, it was just like I didn't feel that anymore. But later on, when I started to feel that come back, I knew I was able to kind of get ahead of it and say, oh, you know what? I feel some stress coming on. Let me kind of get myself in a position where I don't allow this to take over. And so that was one takeaway that I had from your session. It was great.
I really appreciate you bringing that up, Talea. It's actually the other compartment of brain spotting is that there's an expansion side. So there's one side which clearing out pain or clearing out fears or beliefs or trauma, but the other side of brain spotting actually creates pathways in our brain to open up hope, to open up vision for the future, to be able to be more expansively equipped when those things come back at us, because it's life, right? I mean, life is going to keep bumping up into our triggers, but brain spotting actually can equip people in a really internal way to deal with things that would continue to come at them, and they'd be able to show up differently.
That's wonderful. It was a wonderful experience for me. And I know that it will benefit other people that not only have received a cancer diagnosis, but even their caregivers. So let's touch on that a little bit. How can brain spotting support a caregiver who is under a lot of stress? They're probably carrying the weight of trying to work, take care of their loved one, pay the bills, go grocery shopping, do all these different things. How can brain spotting help them?
Yeah, that's a great question. And as a social worker, I'm very passionate about supporting systems and supporting families and communities. And brain spotting, I would say, is just as effective for caregivers as it is for the client or the patient. It's a way that I create a safe space for caregivers to come in, to say what they need to say, to be completely raw and vulnerable, but also to be able to sit in that place being held in love and support and encouragement, and have that time for them to process and deal with their own struggles. I often think of a train on a track, and you have the patient with the diagnosis, and then you have a caregiver, and they both have their own journeys, but their relationship together is like that train moving forward. So it's very much an integrated process to be able to say, let's support the system uniquely as individuals, but also holistically, in that their experiences are going to greatly intersect.
That's so true, Maren, because it is a system. And that's one thing that I like to tell people is, I don't advise you trying to navigate cancer on your own. If you have a caregiver or a friend or someone who can walk that with you, it makes it that much easier. But also making sure that the system is intact is important as well. So I love that you provide that service as well for caregivers and family members. It's so important that they're taken care of too. And unfortunately, they're often forgotten.
Yeah, that makes so much sense to me. I agree.
Mm-hmm. And so I talked about how my session was in person. Do you work with clients virtually as well? And if you do, can you walk us through that process?
Yeah, absolutely. I am able to do brain spotting with people over the video and in my office as well. And it's amazing with technology that we can make such a personal connection over a video screen. But basically, when I start brain spotting with someone, we go into a place that's very creative, but guided and held by me as the therapist or the coach. So brain spotting, we use eye position. So that can be finding an eye position on the computer screen, or for the client to find an eye position in the room. And that eye position actually is the connection point. It's like the bridge to connect into the brain where the trauma is being held or the pain's registering. So as we find an eye position together that connects with, let's say, the guilt that someone's experiencing, then we hold that eye position and let the brain process as it needs to and wants to. So Brainspotting is very, very different than talk therapy. Talk therapy is using the frontal cortex, where we have executive function and language and logic. That's talk therapy. And it's processing, and a lot of great things come out of that. Brainspotting actually brings the client into their subcortical part of their brain. And that's where trauma is often held. It's the orienting part of our brain. It's the part of our brain where, if we have a traumatic experience, we're going to go into that fight, flight, or freeze. So because trauma is being held there, we need to connect with that part of the brain, which is lower down than our thinking brain. So it's not hypnosis, it's not dissociation. A person's still fully aware, but we're using the eye position to connect in deeper at a lower level of the brain.
Thank you for explaining that. And that's so important that people understand how it works and what areas of the brain are being activated by this process, because really it can help them prepare if they choose to have a session with you, just to feel a little bit more comfortable and know what things are going to be taking place. One question that I do have for you is, how could brain spotting really complement the work that I do as a cancer doula supporting my clients? And I'm asking this question because typically, and even in my own experience, it starts out being about cancer, but along the way, so many other things come up, such as trauma, things that we've experienced in the past, and things, unfortunately, that we've held on to that could have attributed to our sickness. And so we touched on a couple things earlier, but what are some other ways that brain spotting can complement, my help as a cancer doula?
Yeah, I love that question. And I really love the idea of partnering with other practitioners in that holistic way. I guess I would say that when a person has something that's so pervasive in their life that it's interrupting their ability to live, or their ability to have joy, their ability to function in ways that they need to, or their ability to heal and recover. Those would be specific things that brain spotting could address, that would be in conjunction to the support that you offer people on their journey.
That's great. And I really think that brain spotting is something that can benefit a lot of people, especially people diagnosed with cancer. And I would love to explore that more in the future with you. The other thing that came up when you were just talking that I thought about was, when people are diagnosed, typically initially it's hard for them to accept or to comprehend the word "you have cancer." And they tend to get stuck there for some people, and it prevents them from moving forward and taking action in their care. How can brain spotting help them start that process to move forward? And I don't know, for some people, it may not be something that they truly come to terms with or are able to accept, but how can they just kind of get past that stuck feeling?
Yeah. What I'm imagining is helping a client to be able to notice where they're holding either that stuck feeling or whatever experience they're having around, let's say, the diagnosis in their body. And one thing I'm super passionate about is people building an authentic relationship with themselves. So when we go into that freeze mode, or that fight mode, or the flight mode, which very well, understandably, could happen with a diagnosis. First of all, that's happening in your inner brain. It's not something you can logic your way out of. So we would connect with that part of your brain, and also connect, like, where is your body responding to that? So it's really nurturing and building the relationship that person has with themselves. And then I would say part two is going to some of that expansion brain spotting, where they envision getting through the diagnosis, where they envision being healthy on the other side. So like really expanding the vision and the dreaming and the hope for the future.
I love that. And, you know, it's so important to be able to have hope for the future and to see yourself at some point saying, hey, you know, I'm going to reach survivorship, and this is what I want my life to look like when I get to that point. And so I think that brain spotting is something that should really be a part of everyone's holistic care. And I want to thank you so much for educating us more about brain spotting. And so tell us, Maren, what is something that you've learned in life that you would like to share with the listeners?
Yeah, well, I've mentioned it a few times, but it's because I'm so passionate about it. What I've really come to discover for myself, and I want to give away to others, is this foundation that as we build a strong, authentic relationship with ourselves, it sets us up in this really secure, stable way to build strong, authentic relationships with others and with your higher power as well. I didn't know that growing up. I learned a lot about communication and like, this is how you connect with other people. What I didn't realize is that the connection that I have with myself is also so important. And it increases my capacity and awareness to be able to connect with others.
Wonderful. And it's so important because it all starts with you. And I know sometimes it's easy to kind of look outside of ourselves and unfortunately blame other people, but it all starts inside with ourselves. And having that good relationship with yourself, it only, you know, passes on to other people and being able to connect with other people. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
And Maren, what's next for you?
Right. Well, I'm excited. In August or October, I'm actually launching into a new training called Safe Conversations. You can look that up online at safeconversations.com. But it's a new tool that I want to develop. Safe Conversations is a framework that two people can use to create a safe space to talk about difficult things. I've mentioned a couple times that when we get triggered, we can go into that fight, flight, or freeze. And that often happens when you're in communication with someone and you don't agree. I mean, we see that all over the news right now, right? People just going to anger or violence even. So Safe Conversations is a very practical tool that I am passionate about using to equip people to say, hey, let's sit down, have a conversation, really be heard, and really hear. And we don't have to agree, but it's a way to hold a safe space for differing opinions to be present together.
I think you're going to do very well with that, because one thing that I'm finding is a lot of people don't understand how communication works. You know, a lot of times two people are trying to talk at once, and a lot of people are not listening to truly understand, they're listening to respond. And so this sounds like a safe way to really get people on the same page about how to have those difficult conversations to a point where it doesn't turn into an argument. It's a conversation about different viewpoints. And
Exactly.
so I think I love this idea. And
Yeah, it's been so impactful. I will say my husband and I took the couples workshop, and our relationship has been radically upgraded, which, we've been married almost 30 years and we're still learning new tools. But once again, I've experienced this and it has had such a positive impact on my life that I want to be able to offer it to others.
that's great. I look forward to learning more about this new offering that you're going to have coming up here. So thank you for sharing that with us. And before we leave, Maren, if people have questions, they want to learn more about brain spotting, where can they find you?
Yeah, well, for general information about brain spotting, you can go to brainspotting.com. And actually, there's a list of practitioners there. So if you want to see someone in person and you're in various parts of the country, you can go on there and look up. I am able to see people over video from multiple locations, so that's not an issue. So if you want to find me, you can go to my website, which is revealinglifehs.com, and the HS stands for Holistic Services. So revealinglifehs.com.
Thanks for adding that. I was going to ask you what the HS stood for. And so I love that, holistic services. Absolutely. Well, Maren, it has been a pleasure having you on the show today and talking with you, connecting with you. Thank you so much for educating the listeners about brain spotting and giving them another tool to put into their holistic care tool belt. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Talea, for having me. It's been a pleasure.
You're very welcome. And I want to give a shout out to the listeners. Thank you so much for joining us today. That is it for this Wednesday. And until next time, let's keep navigating cancer together. Take care. Thanks for listening to this episode of Navigating Cancer Together. I hope you enjoyed it. Please be sure to subscribe. And if you appreciate the show, drop a positive rating and review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. For notes from the show, visit ontheotherside.life and check out the podcast section. After you check out the show notes, head over to my gift shop and show yourself or someone special in your life some love with gifts of encouragement, hope, and positive affirmations. I would love it if you joined us for the next episode. Talk to you soon.